Well, hello, I'm back again. This video is another training video where this time I'm not going to tell you to use a book because there really isn't a book. I want to be trying to explain to you how to read a micrometer, as I would call it, a standard micrometer or a vernier micrometer. Now, what I consider a standard micrometer usually only reads in thousandths. The micrometer I have, it's the first one I've ever seen this way, will read in 5/10,000ths of an inch. We're not going to use the 5/10,000ths. We're just going to use the thousandths. Now, if we should happen to end up between numbers, we're going to round down. That way you and I will have the same answers. If during this presentation I show you a picture of two micrometers sitting side by side, and there's glare on one micrometer that you can't read it, as long as you can read one of the micrometers until we get to the very last step, you read them both the same. We're going to read whole number if there is any, tenths, thousandths, spindles, and then the last one will be the vernier. So as long as you can see one of them really clear, you've got all you need to do to read the micrometer. Then we're going to move on to dial calipers. If you do any practicals here at the school, you will be using a dial caliper. That's all we have here are dials. Later on, I've noticed talking to other students, when it comes to your general questions, they question you on a vernier caliper. So I'm also going to be trying to show you how to read the vernier caliper as well as the dial. This is a very simple procedure. I think if we include all the adding and stuff, I think the most we're going to have is 6 steps on any one of them. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to jump right into micrometers. The first thing we need to keep in mind, they make 0 to 1 inch mics, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so on and so forth. So you have to be aware of which one you're using, because if you're using a 1 to 2, that means all your measurements are going to start with 1 point something. The next thing, there are 2 types of micrometers, like I told you. We have what I call the standard type, and then we have what's called the vernier type. In this PowerPoint, the left-hand side is going to be the so-called standard one. Now, this particular micrometer, I haven't seen many like this before. It reads in thousandths and 5/10,000ths of an inch. For this particular video, we're going to ignore the 5/10,000ths and just deal with the thousandths. If we should happen to end up between a 1 and a 2,000ths or whatever, we round down for this particular project. When we go to the vernier scale, we got 1 extra step on that than we have on the standard one. So if we get to a particular slide where you can't really see one micrometer but you can see the other, it doesn't matter, because until we get to the last step, everything is the same. Excuse me. You just need to learn the procedure. So this is the first one we're starting with. There's the micrometer. The first thing we want to do is look for any this is a 0 to 1 inch micrometer. So we're going to be looking for any tenths of an inch. That's going to be those numbers on the top. As we can see on this one, we have 2/10 of an inch. On the vernier one, they're on the bottom. So we're going to put a 0.2. Then the next thing we're going to look for is how many little hash marks that go between the tenths of an inch. In this particular case, we don't have any. So we're going to be 0.2 and 0.000. Then we look at the spindle, excuse me, and see how many thousandths the spindle's reading. It's reading roughly 22.5 thousandths. So we're going to go to 22 thousandths. So if we add that up, we're at 222. Now if we go to the veneer micrometer, we got one more step. We got to look at the veneer scale. And this particular one, it shows the 6 is lined up. So our reading for the veneer caliber would be 0.2226. Let's go to another one. Here's another one. Again, it's a very small gap. So we look, this one doesn't even have a tenth. So we're going to put 0.000 or 0.0, whatever makes you comfortable. Then we're going to go to see any hash marks. Again, no hash marks. So we put 0.000. Then we look for how many thousands we have. And again, we're right about a little over 22 thousandths. So we put 0.022. Now we're finished with the 1 micrometer once we add it up. But when we go to the veneer one, we got to find out which one on the veneer scale lines up. In this particular case, it happens to be the 5, so I got 0.0225. Okay, let's go to one more. Okay, now we come to a new one. This is a fairly large gap. As I needed to point out, on this particular standard scale, the little hash marks, they have one on the bottom, one on the top, one on the bottom. So with this particular case, the 25 is on the bottom, 50 is on the top, 75 would be on the bottom. Whereas the veneer scale is all on the bottom. But let's start reading this one. This one we have a 4 showing, so we have 0.4. We look for little hash marks. We got the 50,000 showing. The fact that we haven't reached 0 means we definitely haven't made it to 75. So now we have 0.4, 0.025. Now if we look at a thousands one, we got 22,000. Somehow, I don't know how, I seem to love that 22,000s. If we add that up, we got 0.472. We go to the veneer scale, and the 2 seems to be lined up, so we have 4.4722. Now let's go to another one. This one's even bigger. So again, we look for the tenths. Again, we got a 5. The fact that we're not, yeah, we are on the 0, so this time we have a 0.6. You gotta, sadly enough, the veneer caliber has a little bit more space in it than the standard one. If we look for thousands, we don't have any, the little hash marks. Now we look for the spindle. The spindle's reading 0, or actually just a shade after 0. Now if we go to the veneer scale, after we add it up, that's 0.6. We go to the veneer scale, we got the 1/10,000, so it would be 0.6001. Now I believe this is the last one. This one's not quite as big as the other one, but we go back. Again, first we look for the tenths. Here we definitely got the 5, so we would write down 0.5. Now we look for the hash marks. I've got the 1 on the bottom. The one on the top looks iffy, but since I'm past my 0, we pass the 50 mark. So that puts it at 0.50, 0.050, excuse me. Now we look at the spindle. It looks like it's showing 0.5, 0.005, excuse me. So we're sitting here at 0.5, 0.050, 0.005. So if we add it all up, we're at 555. Now if we go to the veneer scale, it looks like again the 1 is lined up. So we're at 5551. Again, it's really simple. Look for the tenths, look for the hash marks, look for the spindle. If you have a veneer mic, then you got to look at the veneer scale. If it's a standard mic, you're finished with 3 steps. I hope this helped you. We're going to move on from here. Thank you. When it comes to measuring stuff here at the school, all we have here are dial calipers. So if you're doing a practical, this is the tool you're going to use. The only, like I said, the only reason I'm going to do the veneer caliper is because your general questions are done with the veneer. So the first thing we do after we shut the caliper and make sure the gauge is zeroed out, then we measure our part. Just like the micrometer, but the big difference with the caliper is now we're going to be reading inches. This thing will read up to 6 inches. So if you look at the real big number, the first one we have is a 3. So that means our reading is 3 point. Now we look for the smaller numbers. We got 1, 2, I don't quite see the 3. Looking at the dial, I'm not at 0, so that means I'm definitely not at the 3. So we're going to be at 3.2. Now we just go to the dial. In this particular case, the dial is reading 90, so our reading is 3.290. Pretty simple. Let's go to another one. Okay, again, the first thing we're going to do is look for the whole number, the inch itself. In this particular case, there isn't any. We're not even at a ½ inch. So we put the 0 down. Now we look at the tenths. Again, in this particular case, we're at 2/10. So we're at 0.2. Now we look at our dial. In this particular case, our dial is reading 75 thousandths. Add them together, 0.275. Simple. Just one step at a time. I find it easier if you put it down like I have it and then add it up later on. Let's go to one more. Here, hopefully you notice we have a 1 inch showing. So, boom, we put 0.1. Now we look for our tenths. We do have a 1 showing, so we're at 0.1. Now what's our dial reading? We're reading just past 21, so we're going to say 21 thousandths. So our measurement is 1.21. Here we go with another one. This one's a little blurry, but we can work with it. I trust you. You're good enough. Let's go. What kind of whole numbers do we have? I can see the 6. Boom. There it is. We can see, because we're just past the 0, that 2 is now usable. So we're at 6.2. Now, even though it's blurry, we can still read it. We're at 7 thousandths. So our rating would be 6.207. Let's go to one more. How many inches do we see? We see 3. How many tenths do we see? I only see 1. And our dial is reading what? 51 thousandths. So what's our measurement? 3.151. Again, I've got the comment section working on my videos now. If you have any comments, put them in there. I also would like you to put comments if you have another subject you're having problems with. I hope to make more videos. I haven't made any in a while because nobody's told me what they needed. I've run into people that are having problems with the micrometer, so that's why we're doing this. Now we're going to go to the veneer caliper. The thing we have to remember with this one, and it can get a bit tricky, this particular caliper, the bottom line is metric. We're not going to deal with that. All we're going to deal with is the upper part of the caliper. hopefully you will understand what I'm saying after we do the first one. Okay, now we're going to get into the vernier caliper. It's a little more complicated than the dial, but it's not that hard. Now with this particular caliber, the vernier scale is on what I call the slide. That's the piece that opens and closes. It's got the lower jaw piece on it. This, again, like the other caliber, will measure up to 6 inches. The tricky part with this is it only shows every even tenth. So if you were to look at this picture now, you've got 2, 4, 6, 8. That 1 is 1 inch. Then that first longer dash, the fourth dash in, the longer one, that would be 1/10. Then you got 2/10. Then the next fourth dash, the little longer one, is 3, then 4, and so on and so forth. Hopefully it'll get a little clearer as we go through the video. Now the way this is set up here now, we first look. What we first see is 1 inch. So therefore we put 1 point. If you want to put 1.0, you can do that. It's up to you. The next step is we use the 0 on the slide. We see if it's past any of the tenths. And as you can see, we've just passed the 4. So then we would write underneath the 1, we would put 0.4. So we got 4/10 of an inch. Then we look at the 0 and see if it's past any of the little tiny hash marks. And it has. We've just passed the 25 thousandths mark. So now we would put 0.25. Now we look at the vernier scale to get the very final reading, because we're just past the 25, but we're not to the 50 mark. So we go looking through, and as far as my eyes are concerned, I see the 9 being lined up. So after we add that up, we would get 1.434. That's the first one. Now if we go to the second one, again, this is a little blurry, but I think we're good enough to work through it. Again, we have the 1 inch mark showing. So we would put 1.0 or 1 point. Then we go and look, and from what I can see, we haven't quite made it to the 2. So we're still at the 1/10 mark. So we would put 0.1. Now we go to our little hash marks, and if we count them out, like I said, we're not quite at the 2/10, so that would put us at 75,000. So we put 0.075. Now this should be a little clearer, and excuse my squiggly line. I had a little problems with this one. But if we go to the vernier scale, the way I see it, the 17 lines up. So we put that down and we come up with 1.192. Let's move on to the next one. This one's a little bigger. As you can see, we're just past the 2 inch mark. So again, we would put 2 point or 2.0, whichever one you want to do. Then we look for the tenths. We passed the 1/10 mark, so we put 0.1. Now we look for little hash marks. We passed the second one, but didn't quite make it to the third one. So now we would put 0.50. Now, to finish it off, we go to the vernier scale, and the way I see it, it's a 10. So I come up with 2.160. Let's move on to another one. This one's real big. Okay, so now we look for our whole number. We haven't quite made it to 4 inches, so we got to drop back to 3. So it's going to be, again, either 3.0 or just 3 point. So Now we're going to sit and look how many tenths we've passed. We've passed the 8th tenth. Getting a little tongue-tied here. So we would put 0.8. Now we look for our hash marks, and it looks like we're just a shade past the 25. So we put our 0.025. Then we jump to the vernier scale, and as far as my eyes are concerned, we got the 5,000ths lined up. So then we add that all up, and we got 3.830. Let's move on to probably, I believe this is the last one. Here we go. We've just passed the 2-inch mark. So we would put 2.0. Boom, there we go. Then, as of right now, I think when we get to the vernier scale, we'll see it better. We're not quite at the first hash mark, so we put 0.0000. Now we jump to the vernier scale. And to me, that looks like the 24 lines up. So we've got 2.024. I hope this explains it. If my eyes aren't quite right and we're not reading the same number, as long as you know the procedure, if your eyes see things a little different, you may have some different numbers. But I'm just hoping you got the procedures down. If there are any questions, leave me a comment. I hope you like and subscribe to my